Yo guys, this is Ryan, Certified Russian talking, and this is gonna be semi-positive vlog, but mostly about kind of a bit of a letdown that we have, that I feel towards Unholy DKs right now. I feel honestly that we are missing our core identity of the class, moving on to the Legion, and I'm gonna elaborate on that really quickly. Yes, we get the new Sludge Belcher pet. Yes, our new plague does like damage and has explosion, legion. Yes, we have a mechanic called festering wounds, which basically pimple popping mechanic essentially. And then we have such thing as the Shambler and other stuff like that. However, the biggest problem with Unholy Decays, it is lacking its overall identity and the spec creativity. Excuse me. And what I mean by that is very simple. Unholy feels right now like to say that the class has been designed is probably a gross overstatement, because what I feel like is that a lot of different mechanics, like developers just sit down, named a lot of different mechanics when it comes to zombies and pets, threw them against the wall, and hopefully they would stick with the design of the class. I don't feel any coherence, anything that is absolutely makes Unholy to stand out. To give you example, in Wrath of the Lich King, up until the last change, up until I think like 3.2, that's when the Shadowmourne came out, Scourge Strikes was a full shadow damage, and Unholy identity was built around the Scourge Strikes. How many you could do, because we had a really strong melee pressure as Unholy Decays, and amazing Chain of Ice, anti-mobility. Coming onto the Cataclysm, actually, believe it or not, our pets did shit tons of damage in the beginning. Then they nerfed them a bit, but then they actually buffed them back kind of a bit too. But dots did a decent damage, and you could have specced in the dots, or most of the time what we did is we went spec in the pets and went for the single target damage, coupled with necrotics. So Unholy's damage was necrotics, pet damage, decent dot damage, but mostly it was just a necrotics and pet damage, straight up. Then Gargoyle was hitting like a truck back then as well. In Mist of Pandaria, I think that was the epitome of Unholy Decay's design, because then we had this Unholy Decay who was a master of indirect damage. We had our dots, and we had our necrotics and Soul Reaper. So the dots would get the target down. Physical portion of necrotic will be chunking the target's HP relatively well, and then we take a look and we would apply Soul Reaper and the target would die. So ours, like, we were very, very strong force to be reckoned with, because we had the dot damage in Mist of Pandaria was the best. Coming into the Warlords of Draenor, why it's such a crappy expansion for Unholy is because that's where Unholy became decentralized. What happens is, one of my best friends who's a Gladiator DK said, Unholy feels like a double, triple amount of work for less results. And the reason why is because anything you press currently in Warlords of Draenor as Unholy, it feels just lacking. It feels demoralizing to press. It feels unrewarding. Yes, our dot does mediocre damage when it comes to Necrotic Plague when it actually stacks up, but so much maintenance is required. But then the Scourge Strikes does almost no damage compared 30k at the best, Scourge Strike 22k average compared to 140k Mortal Strike. Like, come on. The pet does a shitty damage, the Gargoyle does shitty damage, the Soul Reaper does crappy damage for a 5-second delay ability, the Death Scroll does crappy damage. So Unholy does not really have a good identity in Warlords of Draenor. We cannot say, okay, well, this spec is just awesome because yada yada yada, because there's just nothing that stands out. Everybody can do what Unholy does, just better. When you go for the frontal damage, you go for the Frost Decay, you go, which has the easiest spread dot damage too than Unholy. You go for the like really high frontal damage and the healing deniability. You go with the Warrior with a Mortal Strike and a huge tracking damage. And that's why Unholy has a hard time finding anybody, because that's the reason. And that ongoing theme actually happens in Legion as well. First of all, to name a few bad changes that absolutely make no sense at all whatsoever. So first of all, this talent, Portal to the Underworld. Your Army of the Dead explode when they die. Our attacks used to proc Army of the Dead, but they're not anymore. This talent is completely worthless. We have this talent, increases the effect of Fallen Crusader by 100%. So it's a 30% strength, 30% heal. While Fallen Crusader, because it's enchant, no longer works in PvP. One, the main staple of Unholy Decay, the weapon enchants that we get balanced upon, because weapon enchant for Unholy Decay, or for decays in general, is so much better than a weapon enchants for the other classes. Just a regular enchanting is so much better, and having that in PvE and not having that in PvP hampers our damage. On top of it, there's a talent that doesn't work. Then we're looking at the Shambler, and the Shambler also doesn't work, doesn't proc, because it's kind of enchant. So it's a main. You see how this 1, 2, 3, the main 3 staples of Unholy Decay's weapon don't work. And the last one, ghouls summoned by Army of the Dead apply additional effects when using Claw. Army of the Dead doesn't proc in PvP, it's not usable in PvP, and even it's usable, it's pretty garbage. It's like requires 8-second channel, and then you have 5 pets hitting for 300. So that's pretty bad. So all of a sudden you look at the artifact talents, and we have 4, 8, 12, 13 talents total. Out of 13 talents, 4 talents that are not usable at all by us. So that's 30% of our talents are just gone when it comes to moving from PvE to PvP. And that's really bad. Like, that shouldn't be happening. Because if we have the talents in artifact, and artifact talents in work in PvP, then you better be ready that all of them actually work in PvP. So, that needs to be reworked. Fallen Crusader, in our strength should be buffed, and our overall stamina levels should be buffed, so we can kill a little bit more with a Death Strike. But not even then. Even then, I can kind of live with all of that. If the class had something going for it. So first of all, putting Dust and Decay on the ground and Scourge Striking for spread pressure, that happens very, very, very rarely. Nobody would stand on Dust and Decay. Everybody try to get out of it. Unholy used to have a ability in the artifact talents that would grip the targets back to Dust and Decays that would actually allow us to do some really nice cleave damage between the multiple targets by dropping Dust and Decay, them trying to get out of it, and while they're trying to do all of that, they get gripped back, you can be Scourge Striking and cleaving. But instead of that, which it's easy to line up that in PvE, but in PvP it's not possible because it's avoidable by anybody who has a brain, we get our disease called Virulent Plague. So let's talk about, first of all, so Death and Decay is not reliable PvP source of cleave damage. Okay, well then let's take a look at it and let's think about it. First of all, what is going on? What is our damage? So we're looking at our disease dot damage, and I'm gonna tell you, like, we have a disease ticks without a trinket proc for 9k damage, 9.3k damage. 9.3k damage on 1.8 million HP levels, it takes 0.5% every 3 seconds. And then yes, it can proc and crit at the same time with a 30% chance, which still, if we take 30% here, that means that our dots tick for just a measly like 14k damage, which is less than 1%. So our dot damage, our dot pressure is gone. Right now, dots tick for 20k, which is about 4% of somebody else's HP when it comes to 20 stack Necrotic Plague. 4%, it goes from 4% down to 0.5%, even maybe like 0.66 of the percent, even 0.7%. Like, what is going on? Why is our dot damage? In Mist of Pandaria, our dots would get up to like 50k crits. And here, the best possible crit, when the stars line up and you have 30% chance that will crit and your dot will crit, you're looking at about, you ready for this? 53k. So, Mist of Pandaria with a 600k HP pulse, or we have Legion with a 1.8k HP pulse. The dot does the same damage, but here it's much harder to crit the dots because everything has to line up perfectly. So dot damage is gone. It was nerfed roughly by 3 to 5 times. And then we're looking at our pet damage. So let me put the pet on the target. Alright, 23k is a crit. 23k is a crit. So 23k. 9.2k, 23k. 9.2k, 11k is a normal attack. 11k and 9k. So when it uses its energy right over here, it does about 20k damage per auto attack. 20k damage, and the pet has no mobility, so forget about sticking to Arcane Mage with a pet or any other less. So 20k damage per hit. Is that normal? No, it's really, really small. It's a very, very small damage. And I'm actually spec'd into Sludge Belcher, which is supposed to give me more augmentability. But 20k damage, 1%. It does 1% of the damage with a cleave that takes about 3 seconds to ramp up. Alright, so we have pet damage, that's bad. Dot damage, that's bad. Gotcha. Well, let's enrage our pet. And enrage pet 11k damage goes from 11k up to 13.6k, non-crit. And then auto attacks hit for like what, 27k. So auto attacks at least hit pretty decently. But we're looking at about 40k damage enraged. Like, it's still not that much, and it's a 1 minute cooldown. So, and then let's take a look at the gargoyle damage. Right now Valkyrie doesn't work, and gargoyle hits for 1% of somebody else's HP. 3 minute cooldown ability hits for about 1% of somebody else's HP. And that's the gargoyle that can be line-of-sighted, that can be interrupted, that can be killed. It does 1% of somebody else's HP levels. So, if we put a dots up, all of this damage with a gargoyle and everything else, it does, well, hardly maybe like 3 to 3.5% of somebody else's HP every like 2 seconds. It's easily healable, it's easily mitigatable. But then we're looking at melee strike pressure. And melee strike pressure is actually halfway decent. We do about 116k damage with the Pestilence Pustyles, but it requires a Death Coil debuff for 5 seconds. So basically, every 5 seconds we need to proc a Death Coil in order to do so, and that's the biggest damage possible with a Clawing Shadow. However, because our survivability is so bad right now, we also have to use Runic Power to heal ourselves as well. Heal as much as possible, because otherwise we will just croak. So, with that said, when we have everything lined up, when we enrage our pet, which is 1 minute cooldown, we put a gargoyle up, which is 3 minutes cooldown, we have our Pestilence Pustyles and everything else, the top DPS we can get is probably, and we have runes available and everything else, is probably, I would go as far as like 10 to 12% a second, which would seem to be not bad. However, if you look at the other classes like Demon Hunters, Warriors and everything else, they do just a lot more damage. So that's currently the problem with Unholy Decays. It's just everything that we press feels unrewarding. When we enrage our pet, it does like 30% extra damage. When we put a gargoyle hits for 18,000 on the 1.8 million HP levels. When we hit Clawing Shadows with a Death Coil debuff, with everything else, the max we get is like 116k damage, which is about 5 to 6% of the somebody else's HP, which is same thing, 22-24k. So unless our essentially Necrotic Strike would be really strong, I don't see how Unholy actually can keep up. Unholy, by the way, right now here it says terrible. 50% of the weapon damage, absorb, and the next 18,000 healing. I'm pretty sure they're gonna buff it, because 18,000 is just not gonna fly. And then we look at the reanimation, 15k damage, mutation, 1300 damage, crypt fever, 7500 damage, pandemic, it's 13k, like wandering plague, 18.8k. So I felt really good about Unholy Decays when we would actually could. Oh, by the way, and the second pet that was summoned, first of all, it's bugged, but it hits on average about 18k as well, as much as Gargoyle, which is pretty funny. The minion has no cooldown or anything else, and it hits pretty much as Gargoyle. So we spec into this ability that actually makes our dot damage do faster. Again, a faster with a 9k damage. It feels like. The biggest thing is I feel like Unholy is a very decentralized spec at the moment. What I feel like they should do is they should do spec for pets, spec for strikes, spec for dots. And what happens is the dots should be doing, like, there should be a really nice dot spec, which will allow Unholy to be a strong, really strong dot spec oriented class. So for example, we can have Ebon Fever. We can have this one ability where the Ebon Fever stacks up to like 5 times, and then that gets up to 45k ticks instead of 9.3k. We can have the second one is the Ghoul auto attacks proc additional dot that increase your other dot damage. Basically, have something dot creativity here. Here. Put a freaking festering wounds right here as a mechanic. Put a clawing shadows right over here. Put a soul reaper right over here on this bar. But don't make a soul reaper the shit that it is now. Make it is actually better. And then here we can have a pet. All will serve. Make it so we actually take off the dark transformation from the Unholy Decays. Put it out here, so we have to spec into it. Have to take off Gargoyle baseline off of Unholy Decays. Let us spec to it, but let us have the spec here that are pet oriented spec. Have it here that is strike oriented spec, and here that is dot oriented spec. And make each of them make actual difference in our rotations. Here, for example, the average single target DPS of auto break here of this, it's basically 30% chance out of 17.5k. It's about, DPS wise is about 5k. So 14k every 3 second tick, right? 14k every 3 second tick, single target wise. It's a 5k DPS essentially. Let's put it this way, right? So if we take it here and it's twice as fast, so it goes from 5k DPS to 7.5k DPS. But what is 2,500 DPS when the HP pools of somebody is 1.8 million? Nothing. And that's what I'm ranting about right now, is that the choices, the talent choices that we have just to very, very little for the spec themselves. Very minimal, very little. And that needs to be changed. That needs to be addressed. There has to be a talents that are much stronger. So what I'm saying is reduce all our damage baseline by at least half, and let the other half of our damage give us the opportunity to choose it. Whether we wanted to choose it from pets, whether we wanted to choose it from strikes, whether we wanted to choose it from dots. But let us have that choice. So that way we can actually pick the theme of our class that we want to play, and let us play that spec. Okay, make Soul Reaper not the garbage that it is now. 24,000 physical damage, plus after 5 seconds it procs 3 festering wounds and gives us runic corruption. It's bad, right? Instead of that, put an old Soul Reaper back onto here so we can spec into it. So that's the idea. Make it so you can either do a multi-dot cleave damage from this talent tree, or here you can pick up the ability to drop dust and decay and cleave with the scourge strikes. And here maybe pet attacks do put a bile on the ground that everybody does, that everybody takes damage. So that needs to be addressed in my opinion. On top, they need to rework our artifacts. I don't understand how we can even afford 4 different talents that are not applicable in PvP sit here. Mages don't have that. Their talents are well thought out. Pharaohs don't have it. Nobody has it, but Unholy for some reason is stuck in that. And that's really, really, really bad. So that's what I'm ranting about. Currently, as the way it is, Unholy, it just feels like you do too much work for, again, each button doesn't really matter much. And I understand it's gonna be changed, and I understand that Holinka, by the way, is awesome. He responded to my thread. He's like, we're deliberating about it, so which is really good. But Holinka, there's so much that Holinka can do from the PvP design, because the class is constructed through identity class, and that's not his department. And that needs to be changed. Unholy needs to be reworked, and Unholy needs to have a theme going for it. Whether they pick it other pet theme, I'm perfectly fine with that. Whether they pick that theme, I'm perfectly fine with that. Whether they pick the melee strike or the strike theme, I'm perfectly fine with that. But I just don't want to see Unholy to have all 3 themes built into one, with everything just doing everything having very underwhelming performance and underperforming in each category. What's the point of bringing Unholy Decay with a 9k dot tick when you can bring a Frost Decay with a Howling Blast, easy spread dot damage with a freaking 16k dot tick? I kid you not. Like, here. I'm gonna transform to a frost decay and I'll show you. I'm gonna put dual build. So 9.3k, and then here 16.6k, 6.4k, and then this is actually bugged because every single time the frost fever ticks, right? Where is that? Every periodic tick of frost fever deals 10% more damage. So the frost decay does more dot damage and has an easier way to spread it. What does Unholy have going for that? Nothing. And that's the problem. Currently, Blood looks a lot more fun. Looks actually the most fun play. Unholy, it's a mediocre design spec at the moment. And that needs to be changed. So thanks a lot everybody for watching this rant. I'm gonna make a post about it. It's gonna be in the description, but it's gonna probably happen in like tomorrow or so. If you feel like supporting and dropping your thoughts, drop it into comments below or coming into the thread as well. Thank you guys, and до свидания.